Hey everybody, Parag Matawar here. I'm the Director of Professional Programs here at SASE. I'm so happy to welcome all 88, almost 94 of you into this room. We are so thrilled to be back with you. It's been a couple of months. I was just writing in there. It feels like the last webinar was so long ago, and in fact, it was 2 months ago. We've had our national convention in between, met many of you there. Hope to meet many of the rest of you at our next one in Pittsburgh, but we're here for a webinar. So Nanuka, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen just fine? All righty, beautiful. So for those of you who are new to what we do, what SASE Pro does, we are tackling this problem that we call the Asian leadership gap. It's Asians are 50% less likely than our white counterparts to be promoted to middle management. So we're 14% of entry level, and that drops pretty quickly when you go to middle management and upwards. As we see it, the key challenges, there are four key reasons: cultural related reasons: lack of political and organizational savvy, cultural deference to authority, ineffective communication and influencing skills, and an aversion to risk-taking. It's not that the values are wrong, it's that the behaviors don't match the cultural context that we operate in. And adaptation is the key to succeeding, quite honestly. So as we tackle this challenge, the barriers as we see it to progress are, one, just even awareness of what I just shared. A lot of people don't know that there's a Asian leadership gap, and if they do realize it, they don't necessarily know what to do about it or what the root causes are. Second is then, okay, once you recognize, what do you do about it? How do you train with that cultural context? And then third is just the reality that Asian development is often not the top priority when it comes to this space for the companies that we work for. So our solution is to partner with numerous Asian ERGs and HR departments and DEI departments from well over 100 organizations across the nation to use the power of scale to develop and create programs. Some of our larger programs, like our national convention or our Women's Leadership Conference coming up in April, and then we've got a year-round program, a set of year-round programs, including this webinar series. So this webinar series, it's a monthly program. It's free. It is multitasking friendly. The recordings remain on the website, and you can just stay in touch with what's coming up through your registration. You may have ticked stay informed through that. You can also on LinkedIn. You should be receiving this through your Asian ERG at work as well. And so how this is going to work, we'll have a brief presentation from our training partner. There'll be a moderated Q&A with me and the training partner. In this scenario, we will take questions as we go as well. You can enter your questions in the chat, and I will manage that directly with our trainer. And the trainer this month is Nanuka Saikia. Nanuka, oops, I have the wrong thing up here. Sorry, it is the right thing. Never mind. It is Nanuka with Become a Powerhouse Leader Who Rallies Followers and Gets Even the Impossible Done. So she's going to walk us through some wonderful stuff. I know Nanuka because I was introduced to her by our super friend Carlo De La Fuente from Cisco. Carlo has recommended a number of trainers to us that have all been fantastic. So I'm positive that I'm super excited to chat with Nanuka. So Nanuka, I'm going to stop sharing and let you welcome you to the stage. There you are. Wonderful.
Thanks, Parag. And I'm so excited to be here. By the way, I'm dealing with a little bit of a cough, everybody. So if I pause real quick, it's because I have to cough or drink some water real quick. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm so excited to be here. And as Parag said, we're going to be talking about the concept of power. Can you see my screen, Parag? And how we just create more powerhouse leaders without necessarily trying to fit into a mold. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. A little bit about me. I'm originally from the Philippines. That's what this accent is from, but I live in the Bay Area, California now. I'm very happy to call this place my home. Prior to starting Box, I worked in a range of HR and consulting roles across different types of businesses, from growing family-owned businesses to more established enterprises. And that really informs who we work with at Box. And I started the company for a couple of reasons. One is I saw time and time again companies and teams that are embarking on change, they're basically just crossing their fingers and hoping like, let this be the thing that solves this, let this be the thing that sticks. And it makes change very painful for people and most of the time unsuccessful, hence our name, Better Organizations by Design. I also wanted to challenge what people could expect of consulting, where instead of the consultants coming in and they do their digging and then they go to their secret room and they come back with 800 slides, and they're like, here you go ahead and implement this. We focused on putting people at the center and co-creating the future with them, which is why I picked this picture. Our goal as we're answering the challenge that's in front of them is our client partners are developing their capabilities so we can eventually break up and you could continue being successful on your own. And the last reason that I started Box is I truly, truly believe that businesses are the most consequential way to affect society for the better after public policy. Just think of the positive and the negative impacts of business has on its people, its customers, like what they can and what they cannot do, and the communities that they physically operate in. So we work with leaders who are ready to own up to that level of impact. And Parag and everyone, I love what I do so much. I have completed 2 master's degrees in this space, one in Master of Industrial Labor Relations and the other an MSOD. And my team and I, we continue to invest in sharpening our tools all the time. And outside of Boxed, I continue to drive change too. So I serve on the Human Relations Commission of the City of Sunnyvale, advising the City Council on equity-related issues. And I'm a super active advocate of this organization called 50/50 Women on Boards. And the goal is to get equal representation at the board level because that's where a lot of the decisions are made, and of the conscious capitalism movement. So that is me in a nutshell. These are just some of the companies that we've worked with at Boxed. But let's get into it with our first question. And Parag, I'm going to ask you this question and invite everybody else to put this in the chat too. Why are some leaders so much more compelling than others? Like there are these people that their people will follow them to the ends of the earth. They are able to get these people to do really, really difficult things, very complex, sometimes very uncertain circumstances. So if you are one of these compelling leaders, what have people said about you? Put it in the chat. And if you've been around one, what did you notice about them? Parag, have you seen a compelling leader in action? And it might be you.
Of course I'm a compelling leader. I'm no, I won't answer what my team calls me. It's a it's a term of endearment, but others wouldn't recognize. But that's actually part of what makes I think with that, if people make fun of you, if your own folks can make fun of you openly, I think that is actually a good thing. So anyway, you know, one of the previous CEOs from Procter & Gamble, where I used to work for 20 years, his name is John Pepper. And I've never met the man directly, but by watching him speak, and granted, this is a multinational, massive, you know, Procter & Gamble, massive company who returns tons and tons of monies to their shareholders and whatnot like that. But even then, his motivation capability to even people in the manufacturing plant, because he just seems so relatable and authentic and really committed to helping the organization be a good partner, a good public partner, and charisma. I think Gary Marinelli, you just put that in there. Charismatic, absolutely correct, genuine, spot on. And there's just a quality that I think it's tangible, even though it's not physically tangible, but it's tangible, right? And so yeah, I would love to hear what the what you have to say about that, quite honestly. On what would you say?
So I'm not surprised that you would say that one of the compelling leaders that you've seen in action is somebody who's relatable and authentic. And we'll talk about why that is so appealing a little bit later. And you also talked about this person being very committed to making P&G a good partner for the public. Hold those thoughts, Parag, because you're going to be like, yes, this person was using a source of power, which we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the different sources of power. This person
just in case anybody's
that.
Wondering, we did not script this, so apparently
yes, no, we didn't.
Led in perfectly to what you want to talk about. So cool.
We did not, indeed. Is anything else coming up in the chat, Parag, that we would want to highlight?
Yeah, trust and integrity, those are really great ones.
Yes.
Listens more than talking. Actually, we had another CEO who did the same
Mm,
thing, he was AG Lafley, never the loud one in the room. He just was very quiet and pensive. And then when he spoke, whatever he shared was so profound and insightful that he led by being quiet in a way. So yeah, passionate
yeah.
about work, great storyteller, truly believe in the mission. Yes. Uh,
Love
all
it.
really
Hold
great
these
things. Yeah.
examples in your head because as we're going through this, I would love for you to start dissecting. Oh, this is what lever this leader was pulling. And I want to emphasize something that leadership is defined also by followership. Like these two concepts go in hand because without followers, you're just somebody who's walking alone. And so to be an effective leader, you have to be so compelling that people want to follow you. And I just want to share before I go any further, like why I love talking about the concept of power. It is actually something that you can work on. So Parag talked about how we as Asians were 50% less likely to be promoted to senior roles versus our Caucasian counterparts. And a lot of it is we don't fit the mold or the expectation or this, you don't look the part, like you don't act the part. But when you dissect what makes for a compelling leader in the way that we're going to dissect it now, it is actually something that you can systematically work on. It's not just something that you were born with it and either you have it or you don't. I don't believe in that at all. When I first moved to the US, I felt like a fish out of water in this super extroverted culture without the network and not understanding all the unstated rules. And I truly believe that had I known what I'm going to share with you today, my life would have been so much easier. And I think this is true not just for immigrants, but for any transition where you're moving into a new context. Understanding how power works will make your life a lot easier. Okay. So there are some things that you might think of when you hear the word power. These are the most common associations with them. Niccolo Machiavelli, very famous for The Prince. It is better to be feared than loved. If you cannot have both, Sun Tzu in The Art of War says, let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. So you can see why power sometimes feels like a dirty word, and wanting it makes it seem like you have questionable character because it sounds like Game of Thrones or geopolitical battles. But I would like for us to expand our definition to this, which is power is just your capacity to influence others, your capacity to influence their beliefs, their actions, their choices. To highlight this, it is 100% contextual in relation. So what Parag and I, the dynamic that we will have is different from what Parag and Jessica are going to have, simply because their context and their relationship is completely different. And our goal whenever we work with leaders on this topic is to make them more, I don't know if you can see my cursor, chameleon-like, which is you're pulling on different levers depending on the situation that's at hand. It's not one formula for one situation. It is truly depending on who it is that you're trying to influence. And that who can be a group of people or it can be a single individual that you're trying to work with. I'm willing to bet that most of you who are in this room, what you are accountable for in the organization, you don't fully own all of the resources to make it happen. Like you have to work across the organization, even if you're the senior most level, to be able to broker and collaborate with other organizations. So the influence can be used in that space too. Power is a core lever in any change work. This is why I'm talking about power. So at Box, we work across what I call the 3 layers of change. So leaders, teams, and driving systemic alignment at the organizational level. And as part of doing that, these are some of the questions that we actually need to answer. So who benefits from the status quo? How will they respond to change? What are people afraid to lose? Who do people really listen to? How are people held accountable? So for us to be able to drive any kind of change, we have to figure these unspoken rules out. And not only do we need to know it, we need to help change it to get the organization to a better state. So I'm giving context for why the heck I'm talking about power. So today we're going to cover 3 to 4 sources. I wish we could have more time. Gosh, we could do so much longer on this. There are 7 sources, but we'll cover them very briefly and we'll send out more information at the end of this, and then practical steps to grow each power source and lots of Q&A, like Parag was saying. Okay, as we're going through this, I'm going to use two illustrations to help bring the concepts to life. One, these are true client stories, but I've changed their names, obviously. One client is named David. He's the director of marketing. His goal was to get promoted to VP. So he was trying to figure out, who do I need to influence? Who do I need to exert some power over to make this happen? And he'd worked at the company for about 4 years. He built the marketing team from scratch, and they had about 300 employees. And the reason there's a rocket, he described himself as a rocket. He's like, there's so much more I can accomplish for this organization. Christine, on the other hand, she is the chief information officer and the lead for this global transformation office. Her challenge was she now had an expanded charter and a much bigger team, and had worked at the company just for about a year and a half. And so she was trying to get traction in terms of the change that she was trying to drive. And she saw herself as sunlight coming into the organization, shedding light on all the things that could be better and helping the company grow and mature. So we'll use them. And these are what I would call their power wheels. Don't worry, this will make more sense when we're going through the different power sources. But you're going to see something like this. And with that, let's just dive in, Parag, to the first one. The first source of power. I think this is the most obvious one, which is your formal/legitimate power. This is the authority granted by your role. Parag, who do we have? Do you know who's on the left side?
Yes. In front
Okay.
of Elon Musk
Yes.
is the CEO of X.
Yes, X/Twitter Linda Yaccarino. And then in the middle is Ketanji Brown Jackson, who's the Supreme Court Justice. So we may not agree with the decisions that either of these leaders may make, but we understand that that is their role to do that. And so we don't dispute the fact that they own the right to make those decisions. Where you see trouble in this area is when the job description is not mutually agreed upon, meaning the people that you're working with don't buy into the fact that this should be your role. So imagine when a founder moves away from being the CEO and now has some advisory role within the company, because that role is more likely than not especially created for the founder based on their passions and their core expertise. It's less clear cut than some of the more conventional roles. And then that's where the problem of, does the founder own this decision or does the new leader own this decision? So, and you can see people sometimes not supporting the new CEO because it's not clear where the power really sits. In the case of
So in
Elon
this
Musk,
scenario,
yes, go ahead.
No, exactly. So yeah, Elon, you know, I barely knew that was Linda because Elon, you still think of Elon as for X and Twitter, right? Nobody thinks
Exactly.
about Linda.
His
So
shadow is just so large.
yeah.
On the right-hand side, I have a picture of a janitor's court, and you might be like, what? I want to emphasize that this type of power, your title-based power, is not just based on the seniority or the title in the organization. It's really based on the function also of it. So the janitor, it's their role to clean the bathroom. If they're in there, when you come into the bathroom, if you're a normal, respectful person, you're not going to tell them to get out. You're going to wait until they're done doing their job because it's their job to be in there cleaning the bathroom. It can be tempting to misuse this source of power because it's automatic, like it's given with your title. But when it's misused, people will feel micromanaged because like, oh, my boss is telling me to do everything, or you'll have slower decision making because you as the senior most leader may not necessarily be the expert in every single topic, but if you want to make all the decisions, it slows it down. Okay. Quick check on David and Christine, thinking about their goals. So David, remember his goal was to get promoted to VP. He has very little formal power over the C-suite. He can't tell them, you must promote me. So very low. Christine, on the other hand, she had a high amount of power because it was very clear what her role was as part of leading both the CIO org and the transformation office. But we were starting to understand why her team was not getting traction. It was that, and that's why she has two gradings here, is that people did not buy into the fact that these two organizations were together. They're like, why are these together? These don't make any sense. So one thing we needed to work on with her was her socialization of it. So how you develop this power is you have to set clear expectations and get buy-in for your role. Like especially if your role is new and has never existed before. The other is making sure that your words match your actions. So when you say, as part of my charter, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, you have to deliver on it, because if you keep failing to live up to it, then your words just are meaningless. And the other way is to get endorsed. So in the case of Christine, the CEO made a whole big splash about her coming on and taking on these two roles. And that was a big boon for her. And then the last way that you keep developing this power is to actually keep developing yourself. You want people to say, yes, it makes sense that Parag is in this role or that Nanuka is in this role. All right, do we have any questions? By the way, Parag, you can interrupt me at any time.
I don't yet. I was curious, maybe, and you can tell me later on if it makes sense to get through all 7 first. But I was curious as you go through, are there certain ones where you feel like Asians do, I mean, these are generalizations, of course, particularly well or particularly not, especially within the Western context as we talk through these?
I would love to hold that question for later, Parag, because
That's what
as we go through it,
let's
because
do
then we
that.
can have a more informed discussion.
Perfect.
Okay. So the next source of power, or the next power lever, is what's called referent power, which means you can influence somebody because they admire you or they respect you or they feel like they can relate to some aspect of your story. So Parag, remember the example that you were giving earlier of the P&G CEO. You felt like he was very authentic, relatable. I'm reading what you said, committed to the organization, being a good partner. So he was actually closing the power distance of his title being the P&G CEO, which is a huge organization, and making you feel like he can see you, he understands what you're going through. A great example of having people feel at ease is Oprah. I think she's very gregarious. She's full of energy. She's known for getting public figures to answer some really tough questions. And also, I think the thing that appeals to people about her is that she built a career without a lot of advantages. Like, she has really been a success story in that way, and people respect that because they can identify with the struggle, and she presents an aspiration for them. And then who do we have in the middle, Parag?
I know this because I saw this documentary. It's Elizabeth Holmes, the that's the you know the blood lady.
Yes, the blood lady. And like, she created such strong followership, I think, because she was really bold and tenacious. Like, with her ideas, it's so out there, and it
Yeah.
made people want to believe in her. And the other thing too I'll highlight is, at least here in the US, we value achievement a lot, especially individual achievement, like being able to do things on your own. And I think part of her appeal was that she achieved, strong air quotes, achieved so much at a young age. I remember watching this interview with Bill Clinton, and he was talking to her and he said, tell them how old you were when you founded Theranos. And she said, I was 19. And the whole room just erupts into applause because they're like, wow, you were able to do that. So you can see how that also adds to her appeal. On the
But
right hand side, oh, go ahead,
I,
Parag.
yeah, sorry. I think there's also an element of, as a culture in the US at least, we love the underdog, right? And so
Yes.
there's an aspect of wanting to be part of or support a good story, and sometimes that kind of, in this scenario, right, kind of ended up overshadowing what was actually going on. But yeah.
Exactly. And I hold that idea again to Parag, because you'll see that these power sources, they're not so neatly cut. There's going to be a little bit of overlap. Like, nobody has just one. You will always have multiple at your disposal. It's just, which one are you going to bring to the forefront depending on the situation? The underdog story one is an important one, Parag. The last example I have here on the right is Yvon Chouinard. He is one of the founders of Patagonia. So you can also have power over somebody because of your own values. So I personally, for example, I admire people who live very conscious, sustainable lifestyles. And so I'm a big fan of buying from Patagonia precisely because of that, because this man exemplifies that. Okay. I'm going to flip back to our David and Christine examples. So again, David, the marketing person, he actually had really high reference power. He was seen widely across the organization as being really trustworthy, ambitious, creative. And then Christine also had very high reference power because she was seen as a straight shooter, but still respectful. And this was really valuable to the company when they were trying to shift from a more polite culture to one that was more comfortable with direct talk. So she represented a lot of where they wanted to be culturally. So for you all, how do you develop this power in relation to somebody else? One is you listen to what they value, listen to how they talk about themselves. I remember there was this one guy who was convincing me we should work together. And he was like, do you know how much I have made in the last year? I was like, no. He was like, millions. I have made millions and millions. So for me, that was a signal that wealth was a strong indicator of success for him. And I knew that if we were to successfully work together, it was something that I would have to pull more forward to the forefront. The other tip that I would say about this is to build your self-confidence. Confidence is so attractive. Like there's just some people who draw you in, and it's very hard to look away from somebody who's very self-assured. Like somebody talked about that person who listens more than talking, who is never the loud one in the room. That quiet confidence is extremely attractive. And then again, being consistent, meaning your words and your actions will match across situations. Imagine if you were to find out that Yvonne Chouinard, I don't know, had a lot of stock in Monsanto. That would majorly impact his brand significantly. And the other thing too is to develop your story as a leader. It helps people see themselves in you. And I'm not saying develop a script, but be clear about the points in your life that have really shaped you and how you can share that with other people so that they can see more of themselves in you or more of who they want to be in you. I also put a fun little QR code here. I think it's a great way for people to get to know each other. We call it the question generator. It's a free resource that it's open to everybody. So it's hundreds and hundreds of questions to get to know your team better. Okay, Parag, I'm going to move to the next source real quick if I can find my cursor. Oh, my computer is hanging. One sec.
Ooh. No, no.
No. Can you see? Should I close the program?
It faded a little bit. So.
Ugh.
Oh, there we
Okay.
go. We have David and Christine, and now you've got the third one. As you go through this, talk a little bit about how you decide how far, like how do you measure in the map there? How do you decide is 3 or 4 or 5 or whatnot? It's all relative, I presume, but
It is. And I would say it's directional. This is not about being very precise. It's all like, am I low, medium, or high? And what do I need for the situation?
Gotcha.
Like the further out you go, obviously the higher it is. Okay, next power source is expert power. So on the left-hand side, you have a doctor. I would hope if a doctor or let's say a lawyer tells you to do something, more likely you're gonna do it, and you're certainly gonna value their opinion more than your next door neighbors. I would hope, like, if your next door neighbor tells you to take some medicine, I would hope you would put more stock in what your doctor says because they know what they're talking about. And experts have power because they help us cope with uncertainty. So you know you have this power if you use what you know to help others predict outcomes, so you can predict what's going to happen, prevent bad outcomes, and navigate or absorb uncertainty or change. Swing over to the far right-hand side. Who is this, Parag?
Okay, let's see.
Good old
Oh, that's
Bernie.
Bernie. That's Bernie.
Yes, Bernie Madoff, who is called the Wizard of Wall Street. So he had figured out, quote again, quote unquote, figured out how to get results that others were not. So people were thinking, oh, he has cracked the code. If your money is with Bernie, you're guaranteed returns. You're going to get something good because he knows how to prevent bad outcomes. In the middle here, do you know who this one is, Parag?
I'm gonna cheat. It is an influencer who likes doing something with
Yes.
cats, right?
Yes, he's Roaring Kitty, Keith Gill. So he's this financial analyst and investor. Remember the GameStop, the short squeeze
Oh,
in
he's that dude.
2020?
Yeah.
Yes, he's this guy. So he would put out YouTube and Reddit videos showing his entire portfolio and explaining why he was taking certain positions on certain stocks. And so then he noticed GameStop was being shorted by the hedge funds, but then he believed the company had potential for turnaround. So he was investing them and he would explain again why. And so people who were watching his videos were attracted to the stock too, and that caused the stock to rise in its price. And then that surge then caused the squeeze where the short sellers were forced to buy back the stock to cover their positions. So talking about the David versus Goliath, I think this is a great crossover between expert and referent power, where people were identifying with his story of this David going up against the Goliaths, and they wanted to be part of that. So they would look to see, is Keith Gill holding? Is he not selling? And they would hold because he was holding too. So in terms of expertise, because I know we have a lot of technical folk who are in our webinar with us, in terms of leadership, I'm not talking about technical expertise. In terms of leadership, leveraging your expert power means being able to see the way forward for the company or the team. This means that you can see potential risks, obstacles, and you know how to address them, and you can prepare the team to navigate changes effectively. So that is how the leader pulls on this lever in their role. I also want to emphasize that you can definitely have expert power without the formal power. Just think of the people you go to when you need help. Like if you're stumped with a problem, you might go to the smartest engineer in the team who is an IC. Like they're not high in the organization, but they clearly know how to solve problems. So you might go to them. So you're going to them for what they know, not for their title. Okay. Oh, I want to share one more point in this. Your expertise has to match the moment. Me going to that engineer who might be an expert in plant care, when I'm asking him or her specifically about something that's related to work, that's not helpful for me. I don't care how good this person is at plants. I need to know if they can solve my problem here at work. So quick look at David and Christine. David, the marketing director, he was seen as a technical expert in his current space, but very limited expertise as a senior leader. So the question for him was, how far ahead can he really see? Can he identify trends that the company will need to address? And then Christine was seen as an expert, but what we found as we were doing our assessment is that this perception actually did not extend to her team. So she was seen as an expert, but the people reporting to her less so. And this was part of why her organization was struggling to gain traction. Yes. And so how you develop this, one is communicate with certainty. We know this to be true. People hear the delivery, not necessarily the words, fortunately or unfortunately. So communicating with sureness inspires confidence in people. The other thing I would say is share your knowledge generously. It doesn't matter if you're an expert if nobody knows that you're an expert. It doesn't matter that you can predict where the company is going to have troubles if you're just mumbling it to yourself and not banging the drum of we need to be paying attention to this. And the last thing is you should never stop sharpening. I think the mark of a true expert is someone who is constantly learning. Like I always get a red flag when I hear a leader say that they're pretty much baked. Like, this is who I am. I'm like, oh, that's not a good sign. Okay, and I'm going to move us to the last one that we're going to cover today, which is lent legitimacy. So this means that you have power over somebody because someone that they respect, meaning the person that you're trying to influence, someone that they respect approves of you, whether implicitly or explicitly. So on the left side, you have some magazine covers. So covers and features like this from respected bodies have a huge effect, but not so much if it's your HOA's newsletter. So who's doing the endorsing matters. And then it could also be having worked with certain companies or having gone to certain schools will boost your profile. An example of that is on the far right side. Parag, do you know who this guy is?
Yeah, he's General McChrystal.
Yes. So he was a retired four-star general. Yes. And now he does a lot. I don't know if you all know this. He does a lot of consulting and speaking work. And he is obviously able to draw in a lot of people. And the implicit thing here is that if he's been a general in the US Army and has led troops into battle, he must be good. Like he must know a thing or two about leadership. And I also want to highlight there's a little bit of overlap here again with the referent power, because if you're thinking about his military background, you're going to think, oh, he's brave also. He's smart. All right. In the middle, do you know who these are? Well, you know half of this picture.
We know half of this, yeah. I'm going to guess the other one is Dr. Schultz because it says so on the name card there. And
By the way,
McChrystal,
this is
I cheated again because it says McChrystal there, and I saw the 4 stars too. So, and twice it's on his hat and
that's
so
true. He's double legitimized, hat and shirt. So a legitimizer can also be a person. So for those who don't know the history of Theranos, George Shultz, who's the former US Secretary of State, he was really the one who opened the door for Theranos. Like he brought big names to the Theranos board, and people were thinking, if he believed in her, then I can believe in her as well.
the
I also,
advocacy piece is huge here, right?
yes,
Yeah, I
yes.
didn't think about that when you were saying lent legitimacy, but the advocacy is a huge piece. So yeah, thank you.
And this is why sponsorship, especially again for
Mhm.
underrepresented groups, is critical because your sponsor is essentially saying, I am saying this person is good. I'm sticking my neck out for this person. Open the door for them. And this is why I think everybody should have a sponsor, if not two. Okay. Well, speaking of how to develop that, but let me pause on David and Christine real quick. So David, his legitimacy, the head of sales would talk him up quite a bit. But then what we realized in the course of our working together is where he needed more legitimacy was from the outside. So we realized it would help his desires to ascend if the senior leadership could see that external bodies like conferences, other marketing experts were turning to him to hear his perspective. So if he could show that he was valued outside, it would make him even more valuable inside. And also, if his team could win marketing awards on behalf of the company, therefore legitimizing their work and saying their work is good, that was also helpful. And then I said earlier in the case of Christine that the CEO had given a whole big hullabaloo about her role. And so she was tasked directly by the CEO. So her advocacy was high, her sponsorship was really high. So, in terms of how you develop this, one is figure out whose opinion they care about. Like, who does the person that you're trying to advance yourself with, who do they care about? It doesn't matter if you have so many people speaking about you if they don't value their opinions. And more is better when it comes to your backers. So, in terms of the number, the credibility, and I'm not saying to play this as a numbers game, use it to build very genuine relationships. Do right by them and help your sponsors also. And then the last thing, and I know this is very uncomfortable for a lot of us who are Asian, is to get comfortable bragging. And I purposely put it in quotation marks because even I still am not comfortable with it. But by bragging, I mean talking about your results and telling stories. So letting your results speak for themselves, but they will not speak for themselves if you do not highlight them, at least. So just getting comfortable telling stories. Okay. I'm going to do a quick summary, Parag, of the sources that we just covered. If my computer will load. I'm getting the death wheel because I want to just cover the sources real quick. So while we're waiting for that, I will just verbally say it. You have your legitimate power, which is basically, it's your job to tell me what to do. You deserve to be in that role. You want people hearing, people saying that to you. You know, you have referent power when people say, I feel good when I'm around you. You inspire me. Experts, you have the answers, and I'm in good hands with you. And legitimacy, if they're backing you, you must be good or you must be right about this. And the goal is to get the right mix depending on the situation. Okay, I'm going to pause there, Parag.
Yeah, can you say a few words about the other three? Not the full slides or anything like that, but if you go back to the wheel, just to kind of round it out for us briefly.
I got you there, Parag.
Oh, look at
So
that.
there's three other sources. Reward power is you can give them access to something that they want, or you can give them access to the person who can give them that access. That's Miranda Priestley with her admins, who are her gatekeepers. Coercive power is you can punish them by removing them access to something that they want or need. And the last one is reciprocity. So you help them and they want to, or they feel obligated to repay you. So those are
Okay,
the
so I'm
last
totally
three
getting called
sources.
out that people fully believe that this is completely staged, as though I knew miraculously somehow how to. So you're right,
No,
Richard. She paid me off. You got me, Richard.
we're vibing. We're vibing.
We're vibing exactly. So, one of the things that keeps coming up in here is, are there examples of Asians in each of these that you can think of? And or does that actually sync up with where we as a community struggle in certain certain ways of how power is shown, as particularly in the Western culture versus in the Eastern?
So I'll answer from my perspective because again, all of us here would have worked at different companies or are working in different companies. So I'm gonna go to what's more mainstream, like what we see visibly. And I will say actually the lack of visibility is an issue. Like I will admit I was struggling. Like to think of legitimate is easy because that can be any role that we can think of, like any title within an organization. But the others that are on a more mainstream, I did struggle, I will not lie. It was a little bit hard, and I think visibility is a serious issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I think the expert one is one where we naturally as a group, I mean, this is some
Will lean
generalizations here, of
towards.
course, but we do over index in the ICs and the SMEs types of positions. And so we often as a community are called on for our expertise. I like your point there, though, that it's important that you have to feel comfortable speaking up and owning that expertise as well, which sometimes our tendencies are to not do that because it can be frowned on in our culture.
Oh
So
yeah.
I feel like the expert one would be the one that more of us feel like we gravitate toward, and the legitimate one to me reeks of like imposter syndrome because we often have
Yes.
that, right?
Oh, that's so true, Parag. It's like, oh, am I really the SVP for this? Am I really the VP? They're gonna find me out at one point. Like
Yeah.
they I'm this is beyond my skis. Like I'm over my skis and this one.
Yeah. There's a few people who are just like, why are we using bad people for, well, that specifically with Elizabeth Schultz or Elizabeth, whatever her name is, um,
Elizabeth Holmes.
Elizabeth Holmes. But
I will
I like this. Please go ahead and answer why you used that.
I will say, I think this is a maybe insight into my personality. I have a fascination, I think, for all these scammers and would be and hucksters, because there's a part of me that believes that justice is really important. And so I need to know that these people are get caught. So I do have this perverse fascination with that. Like I can't understand how people can flout the norms of decency, I would say, and integrity that way.
That's right. Yeah. I, in uh, thank you for sharing that. I actually think it's kind of good to show the bad uses of power
Mm-hmm.
because it, you can kind of, you can kind of understand how it can be used poorly, right? And that there are downfalls to each of these as well. And or there are potential pitfalls or negatives to them as well if they're not used correctly. And that awareness is important as well. So I kind of like the use of the Madoffs and the Holmes and whatnot like that. So I'm sure people in the room don't necessarily agree with me, but but yeah. And when
Can I
asked,
add something to
yeah,
what you just said,
please,
Parag?
please,
Which
please,
is
please.
like the concept of power itself, like power as a thing, is value neutral. Like it is neither bad or good. It is truly the application of it, like the final outcome, intended outcome that does make it such. And this is why I love working with leaders on this topic because you have the ability to use power for good, to open doors for people, to be able to make decisions that will better the outcomes for more than just one stakeholder group, for example. So yes, power in itself is neither bad nor good. It's how you use it.
I hadn't thought of it that way. Thank you for sharing that. That's very insightful. It One of the comments you made there as well is actually reminds me of when you started this talk. You talked about why you started your business, Box D,
Mhm.
and about business being having an opportunity for having a positive impact and whatnot. And I know I've been asked a lot of times, especially by younger folks. I want to, I want to make sure that I only work for green companies or, caring about the environment and so forth, which is absolutely spot on. There is an aspect, though, if there's something you disagree with the organization that you work for or are contemplating working in, it is far easier to make change from inside than it is outside.
Yes.
And so you don't like the fact that Gillette razors are disposable versus cool. Figure out how to join that team and make figure out how to make the whatever it is that they're making that are, reusable, or that are, they sharpen and they last longer. Make it happen from the inside such that the compelling business reason, you know, uh, uh, essentially steers the boat in that direction. That's the best way to make change. And
Yes.
so, yeah, your comment on that kind of reminded me of that as well. And even, yeah. So anyway,
I completely agree with that, Parag, and also think of pulling on these power sources to be able to do that. So, like, how can this person who might not have the formal authority over the razor's business be able to rally enough support to then make it possible for it to even be considered? Like, can we consider a different product model for this?
right.
And this is why I love talking about this, because again, you can like systematically think through, how do I make this happen? Who do I need to influence and how?
Yeah. Sween Butler asks, as an Asian, how can I speak up about these biases when I am being overshadowed?
As an Asian, how can I speak up about these biases when I'm being overshadowed? Would you feel comfortable adding a little bit more detail or giving a little bit more of an example?
Sween, if you want to if you feel comfortable coming off of mute.
And if not, it's okay. I can make some assumptions.
Okay, let's make some assumptions.
Okay. So, by the way, one of my favorite techniques for being able to question biases are what I would call flip questions. Meaning, if, let's say, Parag, you said something to me and I took it a certain way, I would ask myself upon reflection, would I have thought that same way if it was, um, Jenny who said it to me, somebody completely different? Is it the source or is it the message? So that's one way that you can help people start questioning their biases. The other is, I would, and I don't know the work climate that you're in. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. I'm gonna look your name
Sween.
up in the list. Say that again, Parag.
Sween.
Sween.
Sween. Sween.
So, Sween, I don't know the work climate that you're in, but another tip that you could think of is actually making the bias obvious. And by that, I mean asking around to see, how would we describe what a top performer is here, or what a great leader is, and try to see what the common pattern is across them all. And if you find that it very purposely includes, I would say, a certain variable, such as like, oh, we don't seem to have a lot of Asians, you're not doing it. You're letting the data do the talking for you. You're not saying, hey, I think this company has a problem with this, but you're letting the data do the talking for you. I think that is one of the best ways to do it, especially when you are not in the position to change it yourself. Like, you're
Oh,
not in the role where you're making decisions.
I
I hope
would
that
add,
helps.
thank you for those. I would add advocacy being important. Again, the context matters here, but a lot of women, and then definitely a lot of Asian, and doubly so for Asian women, feel like they in a group environment share an idea and it's not heard, and then
Mm-hmm.
a guy will say the exact same thing and get all the credit. And in those scenarios, what I've seen works well, and what I've seen a lot of trainers also suggest, is you've got to find an advocate, because you speaking up for it, it can have a negative implication, but as soon as somebody else calls out the bad behavior, that changes the dynamic. And so whether that's your manager, whether that's a peer, even if it's a peer who
Yes.
is also an Asian woman, that's also okay. But it comes across differently if you are raising your voice in that way, saying, hey, I just said that, versus if, hey, by the way, Nuka just shared, or, I really like Nuka's idea, even
Yes.
after Gary said it, or Fred said it, or whoever, right? Of course, it's even more impactful when it's not someone from the same community, which is
Yes.
exactly why, even executive sponsors for our Asian ERGs, often the most impactful ones are the non-Asians, right? Are the white men, or the, anybody who is non-Asian. Often they're the most impactful, because now they're not advocating for themselves. They are and it's, maybe that's the legitimacy in a way, but it's,
And
so.
The reason I'll add to that, Parag, like the reason why it is powerful when you have someone who is not like you advocating for you is typically the people we will look to advocate for us are they're closer to the center of power already. Like they're already much
Yes.
closer than we are. And so they're able to do that in ways that we might not be able to do it for each other as the people who are more on the fringes. So they're the ones who are giving access to that center of power.
The which one of these four do you think we as a community do the worst at?
Oh,
And this is completely subjective, but folks in the on the call, if you want to toss in a one of these four
yes.
legitimate referent expert and legitimacy, I'd love to hear what you think is. There's no wrong answers or right answers. So
I would say, just from what I have seen and also from my own experience, the referent power one,
I was gonna
because
say the same.
the context is different. Like it's like I remember when I first moved here, and I moved here as an adult. Like I was already a working professional with a career behind me. Like I had results to speak, but I am a naturally introverted person, and I'm from the Philippines. We do not like the idea of speaking more than everybody else or bragging is such a no-no. And
Yeah.
to be thrust into such an extroverted culture where everybody just talks, even if they haven't like fully formed their thought, they're talking anyway, was something that I really, really struggled with. And I think it's almost there's an internal clash between our inherent values and what is valued culturally, like what is seen as attractive.
Spot on. Exactly the same one that I was gonna mention as well. And it is a cultural driven element of what's acceptable to talk about at work, right?
Yeah.
So the water cooler banter feels uncomfortable to many of us because it does. But and it's not that we're not good at small talk or whatnot. I mean, you go to any family outing at a restaurant, and holy cow, definitely an Indian one, and I know every other culture as well. It's not that we're all quiet sitting around dinner. You can't get a word in, and you darn well better go grab your food while you can, otherwise it's gone. So it's not that it's all just polite and you know non-confrontational nonstop. It really depends on the context. And in a work context, especially in a Western work context, we have this assumption or feeling like we should only be focused on business alone. So yeah, I agree. I think that's the same one. So I would have picked, yeah, expert is the one that we tend to show
Overuse.
more, and
Yeah.
referent is the one that we tend to show less culturally from a cultural
And I
lens.
would say the expertise again, I want to differentiate the flavors of this because there's the technical expertise and there's the expertise from a business or leadership side of it
Yes,
too. So we
good
have to be
point.
able to bring both to the forefront, especially the more senior up you go in the organization. They're not hiring you because you're the best chemist. They're hiring you because you can see 3 years down the road around the corner.
Agree. There was a question in here that I wanted to ask. Oh, uh, ah, And when again she mentions, I read that we as a community fear to speak up as we get one chance, and if we mess it up, there won't be another. It's not as forgiving for us if we fail or say something wrong.
That
How much
is,
truth do you think there is behind that, and how much do you think it's coming from somewhere else?
I do think of, okay, let me again, this is going to be from my perspective. I think there's part of it is something that we have internalized. Like it could be as a product of multiple times having seen it happen to other people or to ourselves. And at the same time, I remember my mother-in-law would always tell me, if you never ask, the answer is always going to be no. And so if you think that you only have one shot and you spend all this time perfecting what you're going to say or what you're going to ask for so that you make the perfect ask, either the opportunity will have passed by or that you may never find those right words. So I do think we should be braver about being able to say something. You know what? I honestly believe people are more forgiving than we think they are. Like I was talking to this one head of HR, her husband is from the Middle East, and she was telling me how he would struggle to be able to share his ideas because he was so worried about like he would choose the wrong word in English. And both she and I were saying, people honestly, they look past that nowadays. Like people are more forgiving than we sometimes think.
I think you're spot on. I think that, for many of us or many of our parents who came over from a developing nation or from a resource constrained environment, scarcity mentality, so forth. So I think about, the tech centers in India where you work 14, 16 hours a day. If any of them were like, I'm not going to work that hard anymore, they'd be like, all right, well, there's 3,000 people outside who are happy to take your job. So they're
Yeah.
in a position where they can't do that. They don't have power. Individuals don't have power to say, I'm not working under these conditions so much. However, here, and so that scarcity mindset is like, people are, it doesn't take much before you go outside and see people starving. But here, totally different story. And I think that translation of what is mandatory, as well as the guilt complex of my parents, or in your case, you,
Mhm.
took so many risks to come here to begin with. I don't want to F it up, right? So,
By the way, Parag, the story that you shared is a great example of the coercive power, which is like these employers in India have so much power over these people and they're willing to put up with such abysmal circumstances because they need those jobs so much because they
right.
know that they will be easily replaced.
So I apologize. We've got to wrap this up. So if you can unshare and I will share. Jessica is going to, let me see. Oh, there we go. Oh, I need to hit that button. Yeah, so there we go. So Jessica shared a feedback survey. You should have it up on your screen. Nanuka, again, thank you so much for your time today. This hour went by super fast. I love this format and the fact that you let me talk.
Parag, I love talking about this and I hope it was useful for people.
I thought it was awesome. I had a lot of fun. And, we will have another webinar coming up here shortly. You can go to saseconnect.org/webinar to register for it. It is How Can Mental Health Be Tailored for the Asian Community, with Alice Zhang, who is one of the founders of a group called Anise Health. I had a conversation with these folks. They reached out to us, and her colleague and I had a wonderful conversation. She was just talking about a lot of research, about how a lot of the research that exists within mental health is with a completely different community in the Western community, the European community, and contextually it doesn't fit our cultural elements, and some of the examples she was giving were just kind of mind-blowing. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's not something that I had ever considered. And so as we were talking through this, I was thinking, you know what, this would be a really cool webinar just to hear that context of how and why they founded this organization and what insights they have for us. I probably should have scheduled it to be during Mental Health Awareness Month, that I don't remember what that is. And I also didn't want to wait. So anyway, December 10th, 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. You can register for that now. And if you don't if you don't already follow us, you can just follow us on LinkedIn. That's the best place to understand, hear what we're doing and what's coming up. We have a variety of free and paid programs. If your organization is not connected with SASE, if you didn't find out about this through your Asian ERG, and you don't believe they're connected with us, please reach out to us at pro@saseconnect.org, and I would be happy to have a conversation. There are no membership fees. There's no sponsorship fees. It's about the most simple decision your organization could ever make. And with that, thank you so much for everybody for your time. And looks like we've got 100% or 111 answers. So I'm just going to go ahead and end that poll. Nanuka, thank you so much. Really appreciate everything. Yeah, we will
Thank you
see you
so
next
much,
time.
Parag.
Welcome.